Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News, and a largely dull Imola Grand Prix is in the books, but some crucial events in terms of the championship race towards the end of this particular weekend. The Red Bulls had a storming weekend, but Leclerc, with a chance to disrupt it, makes a major mistake, calls himself a bit too greedy towards the end of the race, and definitely makes things very spicy indeed in terms of the championship battle once again. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Let's dive into this then. So firstly, there was some rain earlier on in the day. There was all this hype about, okay, wow, it's going to be a wet race, it's going to be rain all over the place, it's going to be a fantastic, people are going to have to pit all over the place for inters, wets, it's going to be absolute chaos. Turns out that wasn't the case at all. There was even hints between, during the race, oh, rain's on the way, doesn't happen though. Pretty unfortunate, really. And just, honestly, the race directorship didn't do the best job they could have done, to be honest, making this race as entertaining as it could have been. And, Hamilton, the Mercedes, largely losing out as that. We'll dive into that in a second here. But a great start for Verstappen off the line. Actually, Charles Leclerc gets a horrible start, as does Carlos Sainz. Perez goes shooting up the inside. Norris gets a wonder start in the McLaren, and he's straight up on Leclerc as well and takes him also. The first corner was gutting again for poor Carlos Sainz, man. There's really nothing he could have done about this. I watched it back a few times, probably Riccardo's slightly more to blame. He goes in a little bit too heavy, obviously it's kind of wet at this point, so probably doesn't give Sainz quite enough space. They collide, Sainz spins off, Riccardo manages to continue after a set of wheel changes. I don't know if anything else actually got damaged on this car, but Sainz beats it in the gravel again for the second weekend running. There was a great chance for him to do something today, but it certainly made the race more spicy at the top right in terms of the podium results we got, that he was out lap one. So yeah, tough time for the Ferrari right in front of that home crowd. A gutting weekend for Ferrari on the whole. Riccardo continues, but yeah, Sainz once again after a few mistakes the last couple of races. Of course, earlier this weekend as well, we saw one in qualifying, right, the mistake where he didn't get the best position he wanted for the sprint race, and now getting beached in the gravel out of the race. So safety car comes out, they're back in business again. Verstappen leads, Perez second, Norris third, then Leclerc right behind him after a pretty poor start. But of course, the Ferrari should have what it takes to catch up the rest of the field. This also, there was an incident with Schumacher on the first lap where he spun off, and he actually ran into Alonso's side pod that then broke off just a few laps later. So he unfortunately had to retire. Awful luck for the Spaniards here, and yeah, he has to go out of the race as well. So in theory, this should be pretty good for some of the cars further back. Turns out that wasn't really the case. Now, Charles Leclerc gets passed through Norris. We'll certainly see some, not necessarily battles between these two, but some overtakes between these two happen later on in the race as well. But all of a sudden, it's Russell showing what can be done in this current Mercedes when there's a bit of clean air and the ability to do so, right? And of course, Russell pretty much maximised what you'd think was possible out of this car, to be honest, this weekend's, whereas Hamilton was stuck in an awful spot, and he certainly got unlucky with a few things we'll see here in a second. But at this point, he was effectively just all the way at the back of the grid, fighting behind what would become a DRS train. But all of a sudden, Russell makes some great moves, gets up into P5, and it would only get better from there, as we shall see. Riccardo then was the first to kind of decide to go to the slicks. The track was drying up. Even at this point on lap 18, from about lap 12, lap 15, a lot of people saying, okay, why is DRS not enabled yet? There's a very clear dry line on the straight. The straight seems all across the park pretty much to be relatively dry. DRS probably should have been enabled at this point. So not really sure why the race directorship, I think it was Niels Ritters this weekend, took so long to make this move, because if he had done, things could have been very difficult for Hamilton, right, who was stuck behind Gasly. But by the time DRS finally gets enabled, Albon's right there, and then before Gasly gets DRS, and he finds himself in a tough spot. But, also Mercedes' decisions, really what they did on the pit stops didn't make too much sense, because I think they were saying going into this race that, okay, look, if Hamilton wants to do anything, and Russell got a great start as well, so he kind of, got the advantage of already kind of getting away from that pack effectively. But they said that, look, if we want to do anything, we're going to have to go pretty bold on strategy, right? Do something a bit different, which you'd have thought this was the perfect chance. It's about lap 17, lap 18, the track's drying out. Why not just pit for slicks early and, try and get an advantage on the other teams as a result when they then have to pit after? Riccardo was the guinea pig really here. He does it. It seems to work out immediately. He's putting in purple sectors, and then, Hamilton does the same. If they'd have just done this a couple of laps early, Mercedes, Hamilton might have got away and it might have been a very different story. This also didn't help. The pit stop they did was atrocious, almost 5 seconds. And also Ocon didn't help either, the Alpine crew just releasing him right in the path of Hamilton. Not sure they fully touched, but pretty much they were together here. Unsafe release eventually for Ocon. He gets a 5-second penalty at the end of the race, which pushes him behind Hamilton. But if this wasn't the case, if Mercedes pit stop was quicker, he would have been further out of there. There was several things that kind of went against Hamilton here, and pretty much nothing happened for the next 15 laps, because finally they decided to open DRS. And it was strange it took this long, really, because Verstappen was just elevating his lead up front. Ferrari was really challenging. Leclerc was really challenging Perez. With DRS, Perez might have got taken by Leclerc. Not sure that would have happened towards the end of the race, but it could certainly have happened then. But DRS wasn't enabled, and pretty much the way this track is designed, with the one DRS on the pit straight, the fact that the straight curves towards the end as well makes it super difficult to really do anything there, especially especially without DRS. So Hamilton gave it a good go without DRS. Couldn't have anything happening though. And as you can see here, you've got Albon in front of Gasly. And by the time DRS is enabled, Gasly gets within the 1 second of Albon, and then there's nothing Hamilton can do, because once again, they're in the same predicament where he doesn't have quite the straight line speed, even though he was so close. Like, he was pretty much touching Gasly coming out of the final corner, and the Mercedes just didn't have the straight line speed to get past him when both had DRS. Not really sure, honestly, how Gasly never got past Albon, right? Because the Williams really should have been probably slower, right? And especially given what Tsunoda was doing further up the track. He had a great race today, like that being Yuki Tsunoda. Like, I kind of thought that probably Gasly's going to get Albon, then, then Hamilton can get Albon as well, then he can get Gasly because the DRS train breaks. Like, there could have been some things that happened there, but they were focusing on this battle for like 20-30 laps, and just, it was the same thing every single time. This also, of course, a big moment in terms of like, pride maybe for the weekend in general. Verstappen obviously just elevating his lead at the front. Hamilton stuck in the DRS train, gets lapped on lap 41. So this was coming for a few laps at this point, but it's kind of crazy to think that last year they were battling for the lead on this race, and then a year later he gets lapped. I think actually by the end of the race, Hamilton technically unlapped himself because Verstappen went to pit towards the end, but yeah, still not a pretty time before the Mercedes to Leclerc, no doubt. So nothing really happens until Ferrari then decide, okay, let's do something here, because Leclerc was stuck behind Perez. He thought, okay, look, Norris is way behind, like 25 seconds behind. We can afford to pit. Even if Norris gets us and overtakes us, we have the soft tyres, DRS, should be able to get past him again. Exactly what happens. And let's try and push for the fastest lap, right? Because at this point, Ferrari, of course, and Leclerc himself was definitely thinking in Australia about make sure and get the fastest lap points, pick up every single point you can. And if he was going to have to settle third in this race, then at least, he wanted to get 15 points plus the fastest lap. That would have been 16, taken away from Verstappen, not lose as much of a ground as he ended up doing in this race. Of course, they decide to pit for fresh tyres. Now, the Red Bulls decide, okay, well, yeah, whatever you can do, we'll just do the same thing, right? We'll pit for softs as well, allow some of the cars relaps to go through, but at least it means that we have a good chance of making sure we retain that fastest lap from Leclerc that was giving it a go. However, though, Leclerc gets a bit too greedy, to be perfectly honest. He was very lucky not to be out of the race here. Like, he went over this chicane way too ambitious, to be perfectly honest. He was chasing down Perez. He almost got Perez, and then the very next lap, he's really chasing him through the chicane, and just goes way too wild in, cuts the chicane way too thin, bounces over the track. The car doesn't like it. He spins off into, and honestly, he could have done exactly what Sainz did, to be honest here. If he went in backwards, he would have actually dug himself a hole. But somehow he's able to keep the car alive and keep going here. But he loses a lot of places. Norris comes steaming through. He has to pit as well because his front wing was damaged, and he goes down to P9, which he was kind of saying he's sorry for the team. That's the thing. This is a big discussion point, right? Because last year, the last few years, all this talk, Leclerc, phenomenal driver, but makes a lot of mistakes, or a lot of crucial mistakes at key moments, has held his kind of performances back the last few years, even in an inferior Ferrari. This year, they've got one of the best cars, top one, top two. Obviously, look a bit different this weekend, where Ferrari were in comparison to Red Bull, but that's the thing, like Leclerc seemed like he kind of turned a corner, right? Not making any mistakes, super on top of his game, super cool head, right, compared to what we've maybe seen from Verstappen the last few races as well, when things haven't been going great for him. And now we see cracks appearing in the arm, right, both from Carlos Sainz, the pressure that might be on him, and also from Charles Leclerc, right, making this pretty crucial mistake, very crucial mistake indeed, because, he drops a few places. He eventually gets back to P6 after getting past Vettel. A few of the drivers, the fresh tyres certainly helped him out there, but up to P6, losing 7 points from where he could have been, which, look, as the season progresses, that might prove to be a very crucial difference indeed. Also, towards the end, there was a great battle between Bottas and Russell. Bottas was coming in, closing in for a few laps. Russell, I believe, also had a pretty hard time because they forgot to, when they were doing their pit stop with him, they forgot to, adjust something, eventually, between wet and dry conditions, that meant that the steering would have been more challenging for Russell, but he held on really well. Bottas couldn't get past him. Great battle here, really, of course, because Bottas was in the Mercedes last year. This is kind of the driver that has replaced him, and Russell did well to hold on. Phenomenal weekend from Russell, really, all things considered. A great race here on the Sunday, given where his teammate was, of course, in Lewis Hamilton. We'll see that in a second. But yeah, Verstappen crosses the line first. Rather uneventful race, but lots of things, lots of talking points, as per usual. This is also the second ever Grand Slam, so pole position, fastest lap, won the race, of course, but also led every single lap of the race. So, great performance from Verstappen. He was in another class from start to finish, and rather reminiscent, of course, of the Grand Slam that Charles Leclerc got in Australia a couple of weeks ago, right? So definitely does raise the question, what actually is the better car right now? Because they definitely brought some upgrades this weekend, Red Bull. Seem to have worked out very nicely for them indeed. Probably Ferrari have something in the works as well, as do the other teams. But yeah, who knows? It was the strongest car right now going into Miami in a couple of weeks' time. Also, though, P3 for Lando. After Charles Leclerc drops down, what a performance of Norris this weekend. He definitely deserves a lot of credit here. There were some definitely driver of the day candidates here. Max Verstappen won it, I'm pretty sure, because, Grand Slam, it's tough to kind of argue against that. But Norris P3, Tsunoda had a great race. George Russell as well, but wow, Lando on the podium again in Imola for 2 years in a row. So phenomenal work from him. He drove phenomenally. And yeah, these were the top 10. So Verstappen, Perez, Norris, Russell P4, Bottas P5, Leclerc then P6. Really big story of the day because he could have had P2, P3, limited the damage. Of course, with Sainz being out, limited the kind of strategic potential that Ferrari had in this particular race. Tsunoda, though, P7, great work from him in the Alpha Tauri. Then Vettel and Magnussen Stroll. So 2 Aston Martins in the top 10. Wouldn't have predicted that one. But yeah, that's how it went. So kind of crazy actually looking at all the storylines as it worked out, but rather boring to watch, to be honest. But Imola, like the track itself didn't really help. This also to mention they brought back finally their kind of cool down room. This is I wish honestly they would just cut out the interviews and just go straight into this, because this is probably the most entertaining part of the entire race, to be honest. Watching Leclerc struggle, all the drivers here. But some reaction from the Ferrari guys to exactly what went wrong. So as Nico Rosberg points out, he reckons they did a kind of a mistake, right, like the Ferrari team, by pushing Leclerc into this, right? Because by saying, okay, let's pit, let's go for the fastest lap, kind of push Leclerc into pushing a bit too hard, which ends up resulting in his mistake, I suppose. Like if they'd have just said, okay, let's just go to the end and avoided plan D, they might have got a solid P3 and a fair few more points on the board. So very interesting stuff. I'll share this clip real quick actually from Sky Sports here from they were interviewing Leclerc, and he basically says, look, I got too greedy, I paid the price.
Yeah, I believe that the spin shouldn't have happened today. I mean, P3 was the best I could do. We didn't have the pace for much more, and I was too greedy, and I paid the price for it and lost 7 potential points compared to my 3rd place I was before. So it is a shame. It's 7 points that are valuable at the end of the championship for sure, and this shouldn't happen again.
I gave it my all but went over the limit in the end. Sorry to the team and to all the Tifosi that supports us, right? Like a pretty tragic result for Ferrari, right? All the Tifosi come out in full force. It was crazy to see all the fans in the grandstands, and then Red Bull just have a dominant weekend from start to finish, right? So not ideal at all for the Ferrari guys. Instead of a P3, ended up a P6. We will come back stronger, he says. So definitely a lot to learn from them this weekend. Of course, we've got to have some words on Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton. Shocker weekend from him. Like, like as I say, if things went differently, he probably finds himself in the points again. But I believe he was at 11-point streak. That now comes to a close. The car seems to be there in race pace, but on tracks like this, it's just where qualifying messes you up, right? If your qualifying is awful, you get put in spots like this and can't do much about it. The team decisions probably didn't help on that much either, and as Toto Wolff says, Lewis, hi, sorry for what you needed to drive. No, this is undrivable, not what we deserve. Scores and results. We'll move from there. Terrible race. So, look, they're going to bring some upgrades. I'm sure Lewis is probably still collecting data or whatever, right? This also 2,030 days since Red Bull last scored a 1-2. So, crazy stuff. The Malaysian Grand Prix it actually was several years ago at this point. But yeah, they are back on top in business right now. But still, Leclerc leading up the championship. Verstappen, though, all the way up into P2. After all, 2 DNFs so far this season. To beat P2 for Verstappen, every race he finishes, he wins. So whether Red Bull's reliability problems return, we shall see. Russell P4, though, Hamilton all the way now behind Sainz and Norris after a great performance of Norris the last few races. But so yeah, plenty I'm sure on this to discuss in the coming days as well. But very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new as always. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you next time.